Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be covering druids. And I want to say that I feel like druids, a lot of the problems that they had in Classic WoW for the various different specs, like Boomkin's having problem with damage scaling and with mana management, Cat's missing some things, Resto missing something. I feel like all of those weaknesses were tied together quite well and improved upon with the TBC talent. So I'm excited to go over the TBC pre-patch Druid builds with you guys because, like I said, I feel like it really got improved upon a lot and has quite a bit of potential for a lot of these specs that we're going to look at. So without further ado, guys, let's get straight into Druid. All right, so starting off the PvE specs, we had to start with the laser turkey himself. And I mean, who doesn't like laser turkeys, right? So the thing that balanced druids were missing out on and what they really had a hard time with in Classic WoW was one, they had issues with mana going quite fast, and also they were missing debuffs to amplify their damage since most of their damage was either nature or arcane, and for Arcane, all we really had was Curse of Shadows. If you compare that to schools of magic like Fire and Shadow, you have improved Scorch, improved Shadow Weaving, and things like that to really ramp up those schools of magic. But we didn't really have that much for Nature or Arcane. So they had issues with mana, and they had issues with the amount of damage that their spells did. Well, we kind of get a fix to that with this new TBC talent tree. You'll notice at the beginning, most of these are just the same. Starlight Wrath, this is now decreasing Wrath and Starfire by 0.5%, or not 0.5%, by 0.5 seconds. Focus Starlight, critical strike chance for your Wrath and Starfire, improved Moonfire. All of these are pretty much the same. Vengeance, blah, blah, blah. Now is where we start getting down to where the actual changes are. We already had Nature's Grace. We already had Moonglow, and Moonglow kind of helps with the mana management, but it's not quite enough. And then we get a new talent, Lunar Guidance. Increases your spell damage and healing by 25% of your total intellect. And you kind of see some similar talent points to this one in some of the other talent trees for the other classes as well. Just like for an Arcane Mage, you get spell damage for a percent of your intellect. For Resto Shaman, you gain healing power and spell power for a percent of your intellect. So this is starting to become a pattern that we see in these TPC talent traits. And of course, we see it for Boomkin here as well. So this is going to kind of help out with our low damage numbers that we saw in Classic while giving us a bit more spell power. And then we see more benefits such as Balance of Power, increase your chance to hit with all spells. So 4% hit rating for free. Also improved Fairy Fire. Now, if you're in Boomkin spec and you Fairy Fire a mob, that increases the chance that the mob will be hit by melee and ranged attacks by 3%. So basically, your hunters and your melee DPS are just gaining a free 3% hit on the target that you Fairy Fire, which is really good for them. It doesn't do a whole lot for you, obviously, as a Boomkin, but still, giving classes in your raid 3% hit is huge, and one of the main reasons why you want to bring a Boomkin to the raid with TBC talents. And then, of course, we have Moonkin form and another new talent, Dream State. So this is a talent that helps out with the other portion of what Classic WoW Boomkin Druids had issues with, the mana management. Regenerate mana equal to 10% of your intellect every 5 seconds, even while casting. So now, with Naxxramas gear, if you manage to have Naxxramas gear at this point and you want to play Boomkin in TBC pre-patch, you're going to have way easier time managing your mana with all of your good gear, arcane intellect buff. If you get world buffs such as ZG percent buff, now you have Blessing of Kings as well. So you're really going to see a big difference compared to the classic WoW Boomkin and its mana pool and mana management, and the new TBC Balanced Druid and its mana pool. And then going down to the second to last point, again, we have something that really helps with the damage scaling of your nature and arcane spells. So Wrath of Cenarius says your Starfire spell gains an additional 20%, and Wrath gains an additional 10% of your bonus damage effects. Really, really helping us out once again. And the last talent point, now, I know a lot of people are aware of this, maybe some of you guys aren't. Force of Nature, at least from my experience on multiple TBC private servers and what I remember back in the day, these things don't really do that much. Honestly, they don't really hurt that much. But if we look into the other talent trees, what we could potentially go into, there's nothing too considerable for us to get in these boomkin trees. For example, we don't really need improved Mark of the Wild, because if you have a Resto Druid in your raid, which you most likely will, they're going to have improved Mark of the Wild, so you don't necessarily have to spec into it. Natural Shapeshifter, this is okay, but again, if we're in a raid or any sort of PvE scenario like that, we pretty much just want to stay in boomkin form. We don't really shapeshift that much, not unless we ran into PvP or something like that. The only thing that we would really want is intensity, but we would miss out on so many good talent points in the boomkin tree if we were to try to reach intensity. So really, I think just going deep into the boomkin tree is the play, and this is level 57 as well, so you still have 3 points you can play around with. You could get Nature's Grasp, you could do more Control of Nature, even though in a PvE scenario, neither of these really make a huge difference. Maybe Celestial Focus, but again, this is also something that is not incredible. The spell interruption is good, so maybe this is where you would want to put your points, but basically these last 3 points are somewhat optional, since none of these really give you a huge impact on your play, but I would most likely go for Celestial Focus personally. The next talent build is going to be a cat DPS feral build, starting off with 5 points in both of the tier 1 trees. Ferocity, so we can use more of our abilities over the duration of a fight. Feral Aggression, making your ferocious bite do more damage, which obviously is something we want. Brutal Impact, this necessarily doesn't affect our DPS or anything like that, but going for Feral Instinct or Thick Hide doesn't really do much either. And I didn't go into Feral Swiftness as well, because the movement speed, Naxxramas is indoors, so that movement speed doesn't do anything for us. And the 4% dodge that you get from this talent point would be relevant if you were tanking, but since this is a Feral DPS build, we don't really need that dodge. So I went into Sharpened Claws, then into Primal Fury, Predatory Strikes, Shred, Savage Fury, and then Feral Fairy Fire, and then we start to get into some new talent points once again. So we still have Heart of the Wild, just like we had it in Classic WoW, but now we have Survival of the Fittest as well. Increases all attributes by 3% and reduces the chance you'll be critically hit by melee attacks by 3%. So obviously the reduced chance to be critically hit is more so meant for the bear tanking aspect of Feral, but still, gaining 3% extra stats is really quite nice. I mean, with all the stats that we have, it's not going to be, a huge portion of your crit rating or really change the course of how your class feels, but still, gaining overall stats at this stage of the game is always a welcome thought. And then we have Leader of the Pack, and now we have improved Leader of the Pack. Your Leader of the Pack ability also causes affected targets, everyone in your group, to have a 100% chance to heal themselves for 4% of their total health when they critically hit with a melee or ranged attack. So anyone who is in your group, whenever they critically hit with a ranged or melee attack, they just get a bit of self-healing, which eases the job of your healer team, potentially allowing for your healers to go for a more aggressive setup. But overall, this is a nice ability to have. It's not a huge DPS increase or anything for you or anyone else. Really, all it is just helping your healers out. Going down to the second to last talent, another new talent point, of course, is Predatory Instincts. While in cat form, bear form, or dire bear form, increases your damage from melee critical strikes by 10% and chance to avoid area of effect attacks by 15%. So increases your damage of critical strikes by 10%. That's the main portion that we're really worried about here and that we really care about, which obviously is really good. We're going to get huge amounts of agility, and we're still able to get world buffs in pre-patch when we're level 60. So obviously we're going to have massive high amount of crit chance. So all of those crits are just going to get a 10% damage bonus. Yeah, sure, why not? That sounds good to me. And then, of course, the last ability, which I'm sure all of you guys know about. This is a pretty known ability for any feral player out there, and that is Mangle. Mangle the target, inflicting damage and causing the target to take an additional damage from bleed effects. And also, I don't know for certain because as far as I know, Blizzard hasn't publicly announced this for sure. But in TBC pre-patch, we should have TBC-like debuffs, meaning we don't just have 16 debuff slots. And if we have TBC-like debuffs, feral druids are actually going to be able to utilize their bleeds, finally. So Mangle is going to be a pretty good ability to finally be able to get for all of you feral players out there. All right, and since we talked about Cat, then yes, of course, we also have to address the bears in the group as well, because honestly, I think Bear's pretty fun to play, especially now that we finally get Mangle. We aren't going to have abilities like Lacerate quite yet, since we learned that past level 60, but still, having Mangle is quite nice in addition to the other things that were added to the tree. So, similarly to the other tree, we go 5 out of 5 in the first tier of the feral tree. Then we go for Thick Hide, increasing our armor by 10%. 3 out of 3 Feral Instinct, so we get 15% more threat generation. Feral Swiftness gives us 4% dodge. Sharpened Claws so that we can unlock Primal Fury. Gives you a 100% chance to gain an additional 5 rage anytime you critically strike while in bear form, which is just going to allow us to spam more mauls, etc, etc. And then all of these points we went over before. I didn't go into Fairy Fire because if you have a Boomkin in your group, which you probably should have one Boomkin in your group, they can just apply their Fairy Fire instead or some other druid, because we really want to use our talent points as much as we can in these later talents. We end up skipping Shredding Attacks and Savage Fury because, again, these are more for DPS, not so much for bear. We go for Survival of the Fittest, giving us 3% more stats, giving us a juicy health pool, more agi for more crits, for more Primal Fury prots, and also more agi for more dodge, of course. And then reduce your chance to get critically hit by melee attacks, obviously something that a tank wants. And then we have Leader of the Pack that now makes us heal ourselves and people in our group. Predatory Instincts, and then finally finishing off with Mangle. And you might be thinking, Alive, you didn't touch on these 2 points right here for either of the specs, and that's because these are more so PvP type points. Increases your chance to resist stun and fear of mechanics by 5%, going up to 15% with 3 talent points put into it. Again, this isn't really something that comes into play in PvE that often. It's more so a PvP talent. Same with Naturing Instinct. Increases your healing spells by up to 50% of your agility and increases healing done to you while in cat form. So again, this is more so something that you would use in PvP. So we didn't quite go for it in either of these PvE builds. Also, you'll notice that in the cat and the bear PvP builds, we didn't go for Omen of Clarity. And yes, I know Omen of Clarity is very good. I'm not saying it's not good, but since we're level 60, we wouldn't be able to get Omen of Clarity and get Mangle. It has to be one or the other, and I believe that Mangle is the better choice. If we were level 61, then we could get Omen of Clarity, but unfortunately during pre-patch we will be level 60. Next, we've got a build that is just pure PvE Resto. Finally, we have a build going into improved Mark of the Wild, so this will be the buffer guide that will be tossing out the Mark of the Wild. So buy all your seeds if you're the Resto Druid for your raid group, because you are going to be the one tossing it out every time. Naturalist, reducing the cast time of Healing Touch by 0.5. And then Nature's Focus to help us with spell interruption. Intensity, most of this is all pretty much the same. Tranquil Spirit, reducing mana cost of Healing Touch and Tranquility. Improved Rejuvenation, all of these pretty much the same, still pretty much the same. Here's when we start getting into new talent points. Empowered Touch. Your Healing Touch spell gains an additional 20% of your bonus healing effects. And that means that Healing Touch is really gonna heal for a lot. Healing Touch already has quite high healing compared to single target healing spells out there of other classes. So now it's giving an extra 20%. Healing Touch is going to be able to do massive, massive heals. And then, of course, Living Spirit, another new talent point, increasing your total spirit by 15%, which is really nice because that increases the mana regeneration that we're getting from intensity. So it's really, really nice to have this. And then not only does it increase our spirit, aka mana regen through intensity, but it also affects Tree of Life, which we will talk about in a minute. And then we have Swift Mend, similarly to like we had in Classic WoW, nothing too crazy here. Natural Perfection, this we didn't quite go into for PvE, it's more of a PvP talent. Then the second to last talent point, Empowered Rejuvenation. The bonus healing effects of your healing over time spells are increased by 20%. So druids are already known for having really, really strong healing over time. However, yes, I know in Classic WoW we have buff caps, so if you have world buffs, druids don't really have the chance to use that much of their healing over time effects because you threaten warriors and other classes of pushing off some of their buffs. So that does suck, and you know, that's just how the game is made. That does suck, but still increasing the healing of your healing over time effects is quite nice to have. And then, of course, the last talent point, Tree of Life, and I think Tree of Life, it's just iconic. A Resto Druid doesn't seem like a Resto Druid to me unless they have tree form. I don't know how you guys feel, but when I think Resto Druid in WoW, I think a tree form. That's what I think of. Transforms the druid into the Tree of Life form. While in this form, you increase healing received by 25% of your total spirit for all party members within 45 yards. Your movement speed is reduced by 20%. You can only cast Swift Mend, Innervate, Nature Swiftness, Rebirth, and Healing over time spells. But the mana cost of these spells is reduced by 20%. So this is why the spirit here is gaining a little bit of bonus effect. It's not crazy, it's not broken or anything like that, but now your spirit is increasing the healing done to all party members. So you could toss a Resto Druid into the Warlock group, but you're not really going to want to do that because ideally the Warlock group and the Mage group as well, all caster groups, they really want to have a Boomkin and an Elemental Shaman in their group for the most amount of buffs that they could get. So you could potentially put in the Warlock group, even though that's not exactly what they want. But most primarily, you could put this into the tank group, making the tank take more healing, which is really actually quite nice. The only big setback of Tree of Life, though, and you guys might have caught this as I was reading through it, it doesn't allow you to cast Healing Touch. And our Healing Touch just got considerably stronger with these new talent points. So, yes, it makes your HOTS better, but you can't cast Healing Touch. So, really, it just depends on if you're going to push off people's buffs and things like that. If your whole raid is scared of you pushing buffs off, if you're rolling all of your different HOTS, you know, regrowth, rejuvenate, etc. So if your raid is worried about you pushing off buffs, maybe you don't want to spec into Tree of Life. So again, if you're going for just Healing Touch spam, you don't have to go into Tree of Life. In fact, if you're going into Healing Touch spam, you don't even have to go into Improved Rejuvenate either. So what would it look like if we were only going for a Healing Touch focused build? And this is kind of what I came up with if we were just purely going for a Healing Touch build, where we get Naturalist, again, for reduced cast time on Healing Touch, Nature's Focus, reduced interruption chance, 4 out of 5 Gift of Nature, and then 2 Empowered Touch for the 20% bonus on our touch, and then going into the Boomkin tree to pick up Nature's Grace. And the rest of these talent points don't really do that much, especially for a Resto Druid. Having Insect Swarm is okay. Having Nature's Reach is okay. Brambles, it's okay, but it's not anything too crazy. Although having Nature's Grace is really, really quite nice with Naxxramas gear and full world buffs. You're already having really, really high percent chance to crit if you're keeping your world buffs. So between Nature's Grace and Naturalist, you're taking a second off of your Healing Touch cast time as long as that cast is a crit. You could also potentially take points out of Gift of Nature and put points into Moonglow. or even into Lunar Guidance, but Lunar Guidance is kind of a similar effect to Gift of Nature in the first place. So really it comes down to, do you want more healing power or do you want more mana management? That's really the choice it comes down to. I would assume that with bosses dying really, really fast, you probably just want to go for the more healing power and just downrank your healing touches if you don't need to do a max rank healing touch, since you're going to have so much healing power and such high healing touches anyway. So I feel like going for more Gift of Nature is the play, but again, I'm not a Resto Druid main. Maybe Moonglow is a bit better here. I assume they're both pretty similar though. Okay, last but not least, we're going to look at a hybrid PvP build. And as most of us know, typically in classic WoW BGs, the Druid's best role is in Warsong Gulch as a flag carrier. So the PvP spec we're going to look at today is my interpretation of a flag carrier spec. There's a lot of different ways you could alternate this spec. You could go deep down into Heart of the Wild for more stamina while you're in bear form, and a few other different abilities that you would get in the feral tree, but I opted to go a bit more into Resto, and we'll look at why. So, looking at the beginning of the tree, it's pretty much all the same as we went over before. You go into Forer, so you can immediately have Rage every time you go into bear form. Shapeshift, just to help our mana as we're power shifting and trying to get across the field. Nature's Focus, in case you do need to try to get a heal off on yourself and you don't want pushback. And I went into Subtlety as well, and this is kind of something new. In Classic WoW, we already had this talent, but it just reduced the threat generated by your spells. Now, not only does it reduce the threat generated, but it also reduces the chances your spells will be dispelled by 30%. So as the main target of pretty much the whole enemy team, that's a pretty nice talent to have. And then, of course, we get Omen of Clarity, and then Improved Rejuvenation. This is basically just to help us get down to the later tiers of the tree, since the other ones aren't that useful. Gift of Nature, Nature's Swiftness, of course, having an instant cast heal on yourself or an instant cast root or something along those lines is always super, super nice to have. And speaking on the lines of an instant cast heal, we also have Swift Mend. So if we have hots on ourselves, we can pop out of bear form, Swift Mend ourselves for a bit more healing, then go back into bear form. And one of the new talents, and something I was mentioning before in the PvE resto, something we didn't go for PvE, is something that we now want to go for in our flag carrier spec. Natural Perfection. Your critical strike chance with all spells is increased by 3%. That's okay. That's not crazy, but that's okay. And critical strikes against you give you the Natural Perfection effect, reducing all damage taken by 4%, stacking up to 3 times. Okay, so this is giving you up to 12% damage mitigation from everything. From physical effects, ranged effects, melee effects, shadow magic, nature magic, everything. So this is a really, really nice talent. I like this talent a lot, especially since as the flag carrier, you're the one that pretty much everyone on their team wants to focus in the first place. So I really like this. And then we dip into the feral tree, of course, to get improved bash and pounce, because CC is always nice. And speaking of always wanting CC, of course, we pick up feral charge as well, because not only is this CC, but it's also mobility. So obviously, all in all, super, super great talent to have. Thick Hide to make us a bit more tanky. Feral Instinct to make our stealth a tiny bit better. And then the only thing we picked up in the balance tree was, of course, Nature's Grasp, a 1-minute cooldown that roots the target as soon as they hit you, which is just another way to self-peel as you're trying to get the flag across the field. Alright guys, that's the end of the video, and honestly, I kind of wish I had a Nax-geared Boomkin Druid, because I feel like Boomkins are going to feel so much better than what they felt like before these changes were made. Also, I'm not a feral player, so I wonder if with TBC debuffs, now that we can actually use bleeds and such, I wonder if Mangle is enough to make feral, bear, and cat relevant tanks and DPS. As for Resto, though, I feel like Resto didn't change that much unless you do go for that Tree of Life type of gameplay. but I feel that Druid's probably going to be more healing touch spam, unfortunately. Luckily, in TBC, when we hit level 70, tree form Druids are super good in PvE. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of Druid, and Rogue will be next on the list. So the next video that's coming out is Rogue. So if you guys like this video, if you want to see Rogue or any more TBC content here on out moving into the future, please just take a second, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, would help me out a lot, guys. And until next time, I'll see you later.